welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Kasper Michaels, and if you haven't heard any of his other episodes, I suggest going back to check them out. He is a popular voice actor. When I say popular, he voiced Morgan Freeman on Shawshank Redemption. Give me your impression of Morgan Freeman so that people
Oh
know.
God, it's how do you Morgan? He'd be like, or maybe you witness. Oh, I couldn't. I'd have to practice him, Robbie. You put me on the spot.
A lot of this is studio effects, people. We
Yeah,
had those
studio
in late.
studio effects, studio effects. Yeah, I
All I
mean,
had was a rusty spoon
because
and a
yeah, it
Shawshank.
took me. It was a lot to lip sync Morgan because he's got a particular style that he. I had to go back and watch. Was it Once Upon a Spider? I had to make sure that I had it all down and a little bit of what was it? The Reading Rainbow? Is that what was that?
I don't think that was Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, he was in the 70s, sort of competing against uh, Sesame Street. That was Morgan Freeman. I don't know if it was called. Oh no, it was called Electric. Electric. The heck was it called? Electric, not Electric Avenue. But
We gonna
Morgan
rock
Freeman. But
down
Morgan
to
Freeman.
the
Yeah,
electric
but it
avenue.
was it was sort of like set for inner city kids. It was like Sesame Street for the Bronx or Harlem.
Oh.
And it was that's sort of where Morgan Freeman got his start. And he was, oh geez, I think he was almost 40 when he was doing that. And he used to just read children's books and stuff. And I think he was a character called Letterman, which I thought was just hilarious. Letterman had special powers where he could turn one word into another word by changing a letter. And so it was really cool for kids kind of thing because you could change like cool to fool and and the guy would run away. It was fun. It's a lot of fun. So
And his other credits, Casper also plays the voice in what was that series called again? I'm trying to remember what series that was called that you were a voice on.
is that Accelerators? Is that the one you're talking about with the Hot Wheels?
No, you voiced over every bad word that was in Django Unchained.
Oh yeah, that one. That was a tough one.
It actually wasn't the actors saying the harsh slurs. It was you on there.
Do
They
you
wished
remember,
in there.
were you this is going to sound like a weird question. Were you alive then when they were doing that on TV?
What, saying that bad word?
Well, what they used to do in the 80s when initially they came out with this system that was the beep system,
Yeah,
or the
the censor
bleep
button.
system, right? Yeah, the censor button. But then they tried a round of we're just going to dub it with something else. And like I did a play with the guy who was actually Joe Pesci's dub guy for like the 80s in New York. And for a man, like imagine the opening scene of RoboCop. You remember how, like where he comes in and the guy does nothing but swear. He's going, fuck you. And when they dubbed it, he was going, flip you, flip. He kept yelling, flip you at Robo. And it was just like this isn't going to work. You can't, the movies were just ruined. Like when they added in like this dubbing thing where you're trying to match up a bad word with something that's not going to offend somebody. So I had to do that once for a movie where the director, it was actually a really cool movie. It had the woman who played the Bionic Woman, uh, Lindsay Wagner, and it was called Contagion, I think was the name of the movie. And I was playing a park ranger, and they were doing this absolutely fantastic helicopter shot where this helicopter is going to fly in and land. And this other park ranger and I were just kind of sitting down in front of our vehicle, and the director came over and said, "Okay, the camera's not going to be on you at all. Um, but we pretend you're doing something. Tell them a story. Pretend you're talking about stuff." And I went, okay. And then 2 months later, I get called into the the dubbing room saying, "Do you remember that thing where the helicopter came in?" And they show it to me, and it's a close up of my face, and where the director had said the camera's not going to be anywhere near you, so don't worry about it. Just tell this story. So I had to dub in truck every time I said truck with another word, which I was saying because I wasn't saying truck. and, and it was just absolutely ridiculous where you're like, are you kidding me kind of thing? Because so I'm basically telling a dirty joke kind of thing or something. And those type of things, they do happen, but it's like, oh man, like those moments being in voiceover, I kind of click when they've had to dub in something after because it's too noisy. The amount of times, like it's one of the things that used to happen to me in movies, or happen in movies, that I used to think any bar scene is quiet. So when you're watching it on TV and there's music in the background, well, look at the people who are kind of dancing. They're not on time. They're not at all. And they're usually just doing this kind of thing. So the they add in things in restaurants like the clinking of glasses and plates and background noise. But other than that, when they're actually filming on the day, it's quiet. It's super quiet. And you forget that. You forget that when you're particularly like nightclub scenes where it seems like it's so loud and everyone's sort of yelling over top of the music.
Well, it's like watch a documentary. There's like if there's no symphony sound behind it or some type of weird like acoustic sound in the background, then you're kind of like left with just somebody talking and it's like really awkward.
Yeah, exactly. Or when you kind of mix, yeah. Well, I get that all the time with some of my the documentaries I'm doing, which is, I mean, I've been doing this one documentary for, well, we're in season 11 right now. We're finishing up.
Is that Mystery Cities Abandoned?
Yeah, Mysteries of the Abandoned. It was originally called Abandoned Engineering.
Thank God they changed that name.
Yeah, and then it became Mysteries of Abandoned Engineering, and then they just changed it to Mysteries of the Abandoned.
I'm about to say the engineering is the problem in the title.
Oh, exactly. It was just so funny, but
It's Mystery City Mathematics.
It, well, and it's funny you would say mathematics because the first two seasons of that show were all about mathematics. It was like the writers were like, well, no, people want to know they want to know how tall it is and how heavy it is and how many people were there and how much that bullet weighs and how long is it and how big is the gun. And we need it down to and you're like, ugh. And then after that, when we did like seasons 3 to 7, it got really flowery, and they took out all the numbers and they replaced it with there was lots of descriptive words about things. And I think back on that. Thank God for the Nazis and the and the Russians, because they left behind so much crap after. Well, the Nazis after World War II, it's almost like they ran. It's wrong, but it's imagine somebody just going, and just dropping all their shit and just running away. And that's sort of what happened. There was so much stuff left behind. And then in Eastern Europe, when you had the communist bloc, you had some countries building like all this communist architecture. And then when the wall fell, people just kind of went, we'll just leave that there. Just don't take it there. Just leave it. We'll just run away, because it was going to cost too much more money to.
Well, people were trying to steal pieces of the wall and put it in their pockets, and there were people like stopping them from doing that.
I think the worst story we did that had something to do with that was 1988. They have the Calgary Winter Olympics where they have Eddie the Eagle and the Jamaican bobsled team. And that was the first year where they had to go, okay, we now need to put rules on Olympic sports where you have to pass a certain level before you can enter, or else this is just embarrassing.
Can't have a form of autism that makes you incredibly good at a skill, and you probably have to find a way to slow key.
Well,
make sure you're not super athletic, as in some people are.
Yes, and I don't know how they would have gotten that way, but so they had to do that. So 1992 comes around, and they did the Sarajevo Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and it was really lovely. Like they built a lovely stadium and everything. And then I think 4 years after the Sarajevo Olympics, there was the war between the Chechens and the Serbs, and the invaders had set up. I can't remember which one was the instigators of this whole thing, but it was very much a ethnic cleansing is what it was all about. And the invaders had set up sniper pits all along the bobsled run. So they had the cement trail that was still there. And normally that's just all lined with ice and stuff. But so rather than tear it down, they just kept it up. And they did beheadings at where they used to hand away the medals. They would bring up the
Jesus.
And so it totally, if you want to take what the Olympics stand for and crush it like a bug, that's what they did during this sort of and they did it on purpose. They were basically saying this is what we think of.
What does the Olympics stand for to you? Because I know it comes on every 4 years, but I only see like very few people get super excited about it being on
Yeah,
TV.
it is kind of funny. It's sort of like I see it's
It's trying to prove you're the best against other countries
yeah,
around
and,
the
and
world.
it's technically it's supposed to bring the world together.
No, it doesn't. It makes people more angry. People resort to drugs and then calling each other liars and cheaters.
Yeah, and what else has happened is, like for all these times where it's supposed to bring the world together, whenever like people are people. And so when you get into competitions, it's never a friendly competition, really, because I cannot think of many sports that are still a friendly competition. Like it's all about crush your enemy like and yeah, there's the amount of cheating that is going to go on, the amount of like we'll do this, we'll do that, the boycotting this because I'm not going to that, and then it became then when they brought in the professional athletes, the Americans did that because of basketball. That's why professionals were allowed into because professional ice hockey players, that was a tough one because the what would happen is ice hockey players would go back to their own countries and then come back um, and they would play. So I think they kind of got away with it a bit more, but it was mainly when they introduced Olympic basketball where they said, well, we need to have like the best play in basketball if we're going to allow it. And so now as a professional athlete, you can go in and do, yeah, there's craziness, the craziness about it. So what does it mean to me? Not a lot. I don't really watch the Olympics that much anymore. I think it's lost a lot of its zing. There used to be some big magic, like, Eddie the Eagle and the Jamaican bobsled team, or you have the ones who uh do something so absolutely bonkers that you go, how did that, like even back to like Bruce Jenner, who's, am I allowed to say Bruce Jenner,
Well, you want
even
to see
though
people do like incredible feats, but now it's just like I don't know. Everything's been turned into a sport now.
well, and some of the incredible feats aren't that incredible anymore. Like somebody wins and like somebody gets in a new world record and it's like, oh, good. Yeah. And the world record is like broken 4 times in the new Olympics. And you go, okay, yeah, awesome. But it doesn't have that zing where you broke a world record and was like, wow. And that world record lasted for like, 10, 15 years or something like that. And yeah, it's kind of has lost its zing because it's so commercial now as well. And for me, the Olympic Committee themselves have not come across as kind of
No, you can bribe them with hookers.
yeah, that's the thing. Or the thing
I
about
don't understand why people are so upset if they get last in the Olympics. You still made it to the fucking Olympics.
exactly.
Like even if you lose, you're like, I did it. I mean, I'm here. I can put that on a resume, and people can't
There's
really talk
a yeah,
shit.
there was a story about that. What was it? China. Um, it's that fast walking thing, which is such a bizarre sport, where you got to roll your buns and kind of thing, and you're
Uh,
not allowed to, that's I can't even remember what it's called. I just call it fast walking kind of thing. But you're not allowed to break into a trot. There's a certain stance you got to keep the whole time you're going, and the favored Chinese athlete got called out, kind of thing. Basically, what happens is as you get tired, you lose it. You lose the form and you lose it, and you'll have a judge who will basically walk up and say, "Warning, warning," and then you get. I think I'm not even sure if it's 2 or 3, and then you're out. Very rarely does somebody get disqualified or they just don't finish the race or something. And you're almost always disqualified from races like that. And so they'd already disqualified a couple of the big runners who were expected to win, and then there was the Chinese runner who was expected to win, and she got disqualified. So her team packed up and left, except there was one of the Chinese was already running. Her partner, she was running it, and she didn't know any of this stuff had happened. She was back in the pack, and she just does her thing, goes up, wins. She's celebrating. She looks over, and her team is gone. They've left the stadium. There's no flags. There's nothing. And she was like, okay, it's good. And like because she was not expected to win at all. So now what's going to happen there? Like when you're dealing with China, can you just imagine what's going to happen to her coach? You know, who you basically goes back to like
Oh
whoever,
yeah, he's
you know.
dead. He's dead day one.
Well, yeah, because they're going to go back and go, do you know how embarrassing that was for our country that we win a gold medal and her coach isn't even there to congratulate her? Her team has left the building. You know, how does that make us look as a country? And like, and you're gonna go, wow. And yeah, I think the sprinting used to be a big deal, like the 100 meter and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't even matter anymore, really. You know, but you had the big names. You know, you had I can't. What was the name of the woman who had the fingernails and the great hair? I never remember her name.
What the fuck are you talking about?
She was a sprinter for the States,
Oh,
and she was known for her long fingernails and fantastic hair. Um, can't remember her name now. It was in the 90s kind of thing, but she'd kicked ass and everything. And then you have the ones like you had like Ben Johnson from Canada, who was actually Jamaican, and he was up against Carl. I can remember.
are you really into the Olympics?
No, I'm a font of useless information.
Oh.
It's what it
I'm
is.
about to say I don't want to talk anymore about the Olympics, but I
Yeah,
want to
no,
get
I was like, no, but this is all when people got busted. This is when people were getting busted for drugs and stuff like that. And you kind of, this is where I lost my zing for it. But yeah, so I don't really watch it anymore. Even I think it's very interesting where, like when the Olympics were coming to London and the entire country said, screw it. This is going to suck. You know, we're going to lose so much money. Why are we doing this? And then the Olympics comes along and it makes money. It does pretty good. And then everybody here's like, yeah, see, we told you it was going to be good. It was awesome. Hey. And you kind of went, what the hell? You know, but it was for literally for 3 years, it was woe and gloom and it wasn't a good time here. And people were not really looking forward to the Olympics. And then even during the Olympics, people were not looking forward to it. And then opening night comes and they see the show and they go, okay, you know, the Queen jumps out of a helicopter with with a la James Bond style, and you kind of go, okay, this is kind of funny. And then they did their thing. I don't think the UK did particularly well, but they still was all right. Yeah. So yeah, so that's my take on it.
all right, back to the Soho Voices
Back to,
thing.
yeah, I think the big thing for that one would be Mysteries of the Abandoned was the big one because that one is,
Is that your normal voice, the one you're talking with now, or do you do a different one?
no, that's my normal voice. I have to be careful of doing my other voices because if I do them, somebody has to pay me.
What do you find it harder to do, male impressions or female impressions?
It depends on the female.
Well, you notice that, right? Like it's easier for a male to do male impressions, but if you get a female, it can seem like they can do them all.
Yeah, you can get where it comes into, particularly this is if you're into anime, for example. Anime boys in particular are almost always done by women, almost always. Like they don't hire children, and a lot of that came out of children have. And when I say children, I'm being generous. I'm just they mean under 16, um, because they have different rules for work. They need tutors there. They need guardians. They need supervisors. They're only allowed to work a certain amount of hours before they have to take a break. Whereas if you're an adult, you can treat them like a slave. You can punish them. They can work for 12 hours. And so they'll bring in a woman who will do all the voices. Oh, and then, well, look at you see the voices of the people who do like Naruto or Luffy from One Piece or
Dragon
there's
Ball Z.
another, yeah, Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, any of the male characters, they're all usually done by women, if they have to sound younger. But yeah, you can get some women in there who can do the thing. But
Have you ever had an audition for a women's part?
yes, I have actually.
Did you get it?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
That actually, oh God. I was asked to, this actually, it's sort of I was asked to come in for this role where they wanted me in full drag. And it was back when I was an actor. And so I went, you want me in full drag? And they said, yeah, the spot is you're going to come in. Uh, you've been doing a play and you're basically like, it could be like Cinderella or you're the ugly aunt or something like that. And a lot of times for theater, they'll have a guy dress up as a woman to make them even more unattractive. And basically, you're going to come off stage and you're going to take off your makeup. And while you're taking off your makeup, you're going to be talking about the product you're using to take off the makeup. And I went, oh, okay, but you need me in full drag for that. And they went, yeah, we want to see what you look like in makeup. I went, okay. So I went and got like condom boobs and I got a dress that fit. A friend of mine was a drag queen and he had shoes my size and I patted myself up and I was wearing this pillbox hat and I had all I had my sister do up my makeup for me. And so I'm walking down the street and I walk into the audition and it's filled with absolutely stunning women in their 20s in bikinis.
Good Lord.
I've walked into an audition for the new Bud Light calendar,
Hey,
and my audition
back
was
when
the
Bud
next
Light
day.
was good.
Back when Bud Light was good, but my audition was the next day. so the casting director looks up and sees me, and she fell underneath the desk, and she was laughing so hard, and she was like, Casper, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm seeing you tomorrow." And I went, "Oh, okay." And then somebody in the room goes, "Oh my God, that's a guy." because I was just at it. So I guess that was a good sign. Now I didn't get it, but that was one of the times where they wanted me to be kind of like a woman. But yeah,
But what about for voice acting roles?
very rarely will a boy, well, these days it's kind of tough because there's a new category, you have male, female, and gender neutral is what basically how they'll put it, or non-binary that's a better non-binary. And so when they're looking for a non-binary, that's kind of a tough voice to do. It's more of an androgynous voice. You don't know if it's a man or a woman who's doing it. Now,
Oh,
me,
you
you
know.
do, but my voice is I'm a boy kind of thing. So and it's tough to hide, particularly after my heart attack. My range dropped, like my voice literally, it was like I went through puberty again, and which was cool and everything, but it doesn't. I don't find it limits my my opportunities for that, but yeah, they do have that limit. So that's usually when I'm doing those things on Instagram. I'm usually going to Mr. Z the Abandoned to do the talking, and that was, that one that almost didn't get off the ground. That one, that my first episode of that one we recorded, we it took us 8 hours and it was nothing but fighting because I have no idea. Like the producer just didn't like me at all, and I start to talk and he would stop me and go, "Have you even read the script? Do you know what this is about? Like, and why are you saying that word like that? What are you doing?" And he literally stopped me every sentence, and we went through a whole afternoon like that. And the guy the head engineer, he's sitting there going, "Oh my God."
Did he have like a grudge against you?
I have no idea. So I think he wanted somebody else.
Oh, I think you told me this before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he wanted somebody else. And so basically, I came back and my agent said, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I went, "I don't think this is going to fly at all." And I explained the situation. And then literally a week later, I got a call saying they want you to do it again. And I came back. And so I started recording it again. And basically, before I started recording, the producer came in and he goes, "I've been told by head office they hired you because they like the way you talk. So I'm supposed to let you talk." And and I'm not going to say anything. So he just let me go for like half an hour, which is really weird in a session because normally the producers say, "Can you do that again? Can you make that faster? Can you do that slower?" And that's fine. That's totally but he said nothing for half an hour. And then we took a break and he came in and he went, "Okay, I get it." And from there, we just went from there. But that first session was like, "What are you doing, man? why you why you treat me like that?" I find this industry kind of crazy, kind of thing where you'll have somebody, I remember getting I don't know if I told you this one. I remember having an audition with somebody where, well, I was actually was doing the job, and they and it was this Scottish lady, and she was like, "Oh, Casper, that was lovely. I really liked that. What you're doing there, it's a bit orange for me. Can you make it a bit more red? I'd like a bit more, maybe a bit more red, with spots of yellow." And I went, "That's orange," and I went, "Why? Sure, sure, yes." I went, "Yeah, I can do that." And I went, "Why is, you know, I've had people direct me with cooking spices. That's always a
Wait,
good one.
what?
You're in a read, and you're reading, and you're going, and you're reading the ingredients on the back of like a of
Oh, I thought you meant they were like tossing cooking spices at you so you can
no,
try and.
they used, no, again, okay, no, they used cooking spice because they would go, "Oh yes, we love the chili in that one. A bit too much pepper on that one. Throw in a bit more salt. Can we have that one?" And you're like, "Yes, yes, I can do that." And the entire time you're sitting there going, "I have no idea what you're doing." There's a guy. Have you ever heard of is it Leland Skinner? The guy who's the bass player on a lot of Phil Collins stuff. He's probably one of the most well-known bass players in the world. He's had like over 2,000 number one songs. He's played on all these. He's the guy you've seen him. He's bald. He's got a long beard. Um, he's he was in a session with a guy where, I'm butchering and paraphrasing this horribly, but he was beside another session musician who was a guitar player, and there was these risers were set up so you couldn't see what he was doing. You could just kind of see his head, and they would go, "That's not quite what we need. Do you got a bouzouki back there?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, just a second." He would just bend down and get back up, and he'd play a little bit, and they go, "Ukulele? Can you try ukulele?" He'd go, "Yeah, yeah, just a second." He'd bend down, and he had nothing except a guitar. And what he was doing was he would just play it in different spots on the thing. And he finally hit something where they went, "Yeah, that's perfect." And Leland was sitting beside him, pissing himself laughing because he was like, I've learned more in the last 5 minutes about this industry than anything. So the next thing he did was he went home, took his bass, drilled a hole in it, and put a toggle switch on it that's not connected to anything. So now he's in the studio, and Quincy Jones goes, "Can you make it? Can you make your bass shimmer?" And he would go, and he'd show them. He'd click the switch, and he'd play, and he'd go, "Yeah, perfect." So he hadn't done anything. But when you show the producers or something that you're flicking a switch or you're doing something, they go, "Okay, he's doing something different, so it's going to be a different sound." And there was nothing about it that had changed. And sometimes just perception. This is a silly industry in a way where you
Well, a lot of times people just want like you give something to them and they just kind of want to give it back just so you can give it back to them in a different way when really you don't have to change it.
sometimes what it is they want to feel like they're contributing as well. So they're
Or controlling.
Yeah, and there is that because they want it to be like, I'm going to tell him to do something, and I want him to do it for me. And if he does it for me, I can say I made him do that. And so I got I got very good at doing what I want to do, but make it look like it's what they asked me to do. and uh, and that was mainly the deal that you get. You can't take this industry very seriously in a way like it's just it's the sort of like acting is.
How does it relate to the Hollywood industry when it comes to the closeness of the entertainment system? Such as like if you piss off one director, could that affect with other directors where you get
No,
blacklisted?
no, this is actually that's a good thing because particularly these days where you have a lot of big name actors.
Because you come on here and you say whatever you want because it's just a free basis show, but in the end, couldn't that affect long run when it comes
It
to
could,
potential
depending on
spots?
who you piss off and what you say, and which is why sometimes I might withhold a name, but I don't really. If something's happened so much in my past, I don't really care. And there's certain things about this industry that it's like, whatever, kind of thing. If somebody's going to use me, they're going to use me. Like um, the the funny thing about this industry is people will go, "We need a big name to do this," and you'll bring the big name in, who's usually an actor,
Jason
and
Segel.
you sit them down in front of a microphone, and they don't know how to use it, and they sound like crap. But they're a big name, and so they're paying them. They would for a job that they would pay me a certain amount. they're going to pay them 20 times more because they're a big name. Like the amount of times I went, Patrick Stewart, do you really need to voice another Mercedes commercial? You do not need the money, but the big names that they got, or the amount of times where people say we need it in this person's style, like Morgan Freeman, Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, those names get. The funniest thing that ever happened to me in that regard was I actually had a breakdown that came through. This was in Vancouver, a breakdown that came in looking for a Kasper Michaels type read. And my agent went, why aren't they hiring you if that's what so she called them up and said, it was for like X-Files or something like that, and they'd used me already, and there's a policy that TV shows can only use you once a year. So what would happen then is you had to become very judicious about the parts you choose to play, just in case a bigger part came up. The other thing that might happen is nothing else may come up. And uh, and it was really hard to do because when you have a show like the X-Files, for example, you've got Scully, Mulder, and then the other five. You call it the Star Trek syndrome. You have your core 5 to 7 people. That's what the show's about. And unless you're the bad guy, the villain, the guest or the love interest for the show, you're lucky if you get one line. That's cool but if you think of any Star Trek show, anything like, very rarely do the side characters get more than 1 or 2 lines. And then because the other actors, the core crew, they've got all their lines. That's what they have to. So for holding out for more than 1 line is like, sometimes it's
Well,
not
how
worth it.
replaceable is a voice actor? I'm guessing it depends on how connected they are to the show. Like, I wouldn't imagine being able to watch Dragon Ball Z without that guy in the beginning
Yeah,
saying
see,
Dragon Ball
yeah,
Z.
and that's actually a super question these days because there's a whole thing happening with a company called Hoyoverse, who based out of China. They do gotcha games. And gotcha games are like Genshin Impact. I think Honkai Star Trail, I think is another one. And there's a couple of them that are out there. And there's voiceover communities all over the world. Like there's Chinese, there's Japanese, there's the French. They call it localization, and the English voice actors who are based in the West decided to do something. I'm going to say it's stupid. I'm just going to say it's really stupid. As a voiceover actor myself, um, SAG was having this strike about AI protection about certain companies, but they were dinging companies like EA, Warner Brothers, who do like the Batman series. They're trying to get American companies to say we need protections about AI. And there was this Hoyoverse games, the Genshin Impact, which are based out of China. Um, the the actors, the English VAs, got together and decided to withhold service to try and force Hoyoverse to join the union. The problems that this had on so many levels were like, A, it's an American company or it's an American union and it's a Chinese company. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get that. And the other thing is, China is actually really strict on AI voices. They don't like him.
I
They don't
don't,
like him at
I don't
all.
think China likes AI at all.
Yeah, they're very much anti. They don't want that type of thing.
They like technology, but they still do traditional
Yeah, because
stuff.
when you look at all the technology now, they're not like Japan-wise technology kind of thing, but they're sort of like a different like mass technology what they do in China. But yeah, they don't like AI, so there's good policies in place for games about using AI instead. And the English actors they're withholding work, and they said it was because we're trying to get AI protections. Well, it's since come out that that's not what they wanted. They want the project to become union, and what'll happen then is that means that non-union actors or actors who live in other parts of the world, like me, for example, even though I'm an English, sound American, I live in the UK, so I can't join SAG because I live here. But that would mean if it became a SAG project that all the actors from all over the world we'd lose our jobs if we were going to do this. So what happened, Hoyoverse went 6 months or so, and then they started replacing the VAs. They started replacing the voices. And um, people are like, you can't do that. You can't. And And people went, yeah, yeah, they can, because really, this was all on you. You decided to withhold work to try and force the project to go union. A Chinese company doesn't have to join the union. In fact, they're probably not going to. You should have known that right from the beginning. What are you trying to do? And so they're now systematically being replaced with happen. Now, they're not replacing them with AI. They're replacing them with other actors who live in other countries, like Japan or China or some things like that.
Well, also, is it can't they just have a bare like minimum skeletal crew as well too? Like most stations I've noticed now have a skeletal crew.
They can, like, what happens with this is, well, basically with these gotcha games is how it works is the way they're organized is around they actually do a really good job, whether you like those type of games or not. They do a really good job of storytelling. And so there's a lot of voiced stuff going on, because if somebody has to read, a lot of these people play these games on their phones. So they want voiced actors to say what's going on. That way you can just pop your buds in, play the game, and you don't really have to focus on little text or anything like that. And you could just go with it. So they tell good stories, and there's lots of dialogue in these things. So these these guys are like, uh, and the strange thing is these are all SAG affiliated actors working on a non-union project. And now they're trying to make the project union so that they can sort of be justified in what they were doing. SAG has this lovely thing called Golden Rule One, which is sort of like the prime directive, which basically says don't do non-union stuff. That's what it says. But there's a caveat in the bottom that says don't do non-union stuff, but you're welcome to audition for non-union stuff. And then when you get the part, hold out and say, actually, I can't do this unless it's union. And then the company has to decide whether or not they want to recast or join the union, which is kind of dirty. That's a sneaky thing. But it's in their SAG, papers. They it's been on the internet and stuff. I don't know if they so it's so yeah. So they
Well, hold
do.
on. For the longest time, I think with actors and voice actors, there's probably been a large amount of oversight, or not oversight, lack of oversight when it comes to just safety precautions in that industry alone. So the fact that the Hollywood industry, for instance, has just completely riddled so many actors. I mean, dude, do you think about the stuff they do at Universal Studios with like the weight contracts where you have to stay in between a certain weight and to lose your job? Um, Actors don't have anything when it comes to safety precautions in those certain situations. If you get injured or if something happens and you can't no longer perform your role, they'll just recast you if they have to, unless you're a big
They
part
will.
player.
They will. This is where the this is where I could get myself in trouble just because my opinion. But I've never been a big fan of the DEI stuff. I've always been a fan of a meritocracy, meaning if you're the best person for the role, no matter your sex, color, religion, you should get it. You should get the role. Having seeing actors step down from The Simpsons roles, like Abu, the store, clerk who was played by
Hank
Hank
Azari.
Azaria.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Azaria.
he stepped down because he started getting flack because he's not Indian.
But again, that's the thing is that I think we've talked about this in the past, but it gets to a point where I guess we don't really realize because when you're like watching a film and you notice that there's background noise and then you take out the background noise, you realize how important that was to it. It's like with voice actors and other talents. Do you really care for the fact that the person has to be a certain ethnicity, or should you care more for the fact that they're able to do the job correctly?
This is the thing, and this is what's happened. Like with DEI, all of a sudden the focus changed from this is a good recording, this is a good character. When you're thinking more about who's playing the character rather than the character themselves, the character is not doing their job. Like if you ever look at an actor on the screen and you think about, wow, that must have been really hard to do, rather than just being right in the moment and going, holy crap, that was awesome, you know, then the actor's not doing their job. And so if you have voiceover actors who, if you're constantly guessing if they're the right I don't give a shit about the ethnicity really. And this is where you come down to, like, is it a man or a woman? I don't care as long as they do the job. Like I've never thought, if there's a woman doing a part, I went, I, is that a guy or a girl? I've never done that. I just went, wow, that's an awesome character, And what's happening is a lot of the DEI stuff is coming out of California. So a lot of the stuff that's happening is they're trying to they're trying to pull stuff into California. Like they actually tried to pass it when they were talking about, I think it was even Trump, he was trying to, where they was talking about movies. He was like, we need to keep movies in California. We need to, he's going to put tariffs on movies. Well, there are other states where they do movies like Texas and Arizona and North Carolina and Florida, all these great places where they film, not just LA. So what's happening in LA is, and I've got friends who live in LA, and I really feel for them. Um, but LA is kind of falling apart because people are going, well, we don't want to work here anymore. This is ridiculous. In fact, if you film a movie in California, it cannot look like anything else other than California. It's sort of a new law that they put out in the last little while, which means, say you wanted to go, and the amount of times that people, like, say they, you're filming X-Files and you're filming in a backlot somewhere, and it doesn't matter what it is, but you convince people that it's Chicago or this is Detroit, but you're filming in LA. It's sort of like NCIS, which was supposed to be set in East Coast, was filmed West Coast. There was it's supposed to be actually CSI that's a good example, which is supposed to be Vegas. CSI actually filmed in LA.
How do you know? How do you know, really? Come on.
Because I spoke to
There's 50 of those fucking shows.
No, it was the last time I was in Las Vegas, and I actually I asked around to people who did film and TV in Las Vegas. I said, so do you get a chance to work on any of the shows that come here? And they said, there aren't many shows that shoot in LA or in Las Vegas. They shoot somewhere else, and then they might come and do. Very rarely do the actors show up here. The deserts scenes that they show that are all over the place outside of Vegas, that's just the deserts they have outside of LA, like Mojave Desert, something like that. They'll go up and do them. And I found that really sad. When I found that out, I was like, they don't film on location? Really? So what they'll do is they'll show the exterior of something, and then they cut to interior, and it's
Hollywood magic, baby.
It is Hollywood magic. And so some of the Hollywood magic is kind of weird. And so these days, they're finding that, for example, a lot of the stuff that was happening about like cultural appropriation, where they were talking about cultural appropriation, a lot of that came out of California. And you're going, why is this such a big deal to you guys? Like, why is this such a thing?
Well, it's so weird because you got to think of the McCarthy era, and when that was like the giant Red Scare and everyone's getting blamed and called a communist, and then it's gone the complete opposite now, where it's like if you're not trans or if you're not something, you're not getting a role.
Well, there's a whole big switch into like communism now. It's sort of coming back in a way when I just remember back to like the movies from like the 60s and the 70s where they used to talk about pinko commies and and they had your John Waynes, and we just did a story just recently, the last recording we did, which was about Ethel and what was
Ethel Kennedy?
The Rosenbaums, or is it Rosen? The ones who were the spies, Ethel and, of course, I'm getting old, I guess.
Rosenthal?
The Rosenthals. They were Russian spies, or they were Russian plants. They actually weren't the original plant. I think it was there was a relative who was in this plant where they were, and then they got caught and they were basically executed there was a secret facility in, was it Fort Monmouth, I think? Is that where it was? I'm trying to think of where it was, but I think it was New Jersey or somewhere. But they were doing state of the art telecommunications, and everything was being leaked back to the Russians. 1949, I think did they show? Was it 1949 or not? When did the Russians drop their bomb? Do you know their nuclear bomb, the first one? It might have been 1950. No, it was 1949.
Wait, when the Russians dropped their first one?
Well, yeah. Well, the Russians did their own nuclear test.
Yeah, I know. I was just making sure you were sounding like you're trying to get into World War II, and I was like, what?
No. They did their own test, and it was 1949. And it was almost a carbon copy of the bomb that was tested
Yeah, but
when Oppenheimer.
that's how they got the Manhattan Project. There was a spy, and they showed it. They talked about it in the Oppenheimer movie. But
Yeah, in there. So that's when they get there. So when they talk about that, so that was where they went, okay, that was when they realized kind of we had a spy kind of thing. It was, but it wasn't like the movie Oppenheimer, they didn't know what was going on because when you think about when the bombs were dropped, there's a 5 year difference kind of thing in
yeah,
between.
well, they show it when they built that town, and based on it's actually historically really accurate. It's one thing I really like about Martin Scorsese is that he actually gets down to like the detailed. That's why his movies are like 6 hours fucking long. But when they're all going to the town, the one Oppenheimer was asked if he wanted to bring some scientists or bring. They were going to fund him with people,
Well,
and he
wait a
wanted.
minute. The Oppenheimer, because the last Oppenheimer movie wasn't that Nolan, Christopher Nolan?
No, that was Martin Scorsese's film. It was four
Oh,
hours long. What do you mean Christopher Nolan's not making a 4 hour movie?
no, because I thought the last one they had with Oppenheimer
The
was
one
Christopher
with
Nolan.
no, the one with not God, what's his name? The dude who played what's his name? You know him. Oh God. Curse, whatever his name is. The guy's such
Yeah,
a
the Irish guy. Yeah, from Peaky Blinders.
is he Irish?
Yeah.
No, that was a Martin Scorsese film.
Oh, you better look into that one,
I'm gonna
fella.
show Google it right now.
I'm pretty sure it was Christopher Nolan because I've seen interviews where they talk about Chris Nolan
It might be Chris
hiring
Nolan.
them. Um,
I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
yeah, it was. They they do a lot of talking about it over here
It is
because
Christopher
of
Nolan. You're right. I was
yeah,
wrong.
no, but
Oh,
still,
that's the guy who did Interstellar. Okay, never mind.
yeah, but still, with your point, both of them do, historically accurate stuff, Scorsese and Nolan. And when you get into this movie, so the
No,
story
stop.
that we,
Hold on. Fuck off. Let
yeah,
me get
no,
let me
no,
let me get to my
anyway,
point. Let me get to my
yeah,
point.
anyway, okay,
Hold on.
what is it?
When they built the town with Oppenheimer and they had everything like that, the way that the spy got in was that they were going to fund him with people, scientists, the U.S. government was going to fund him with scientists to do his projects, but he didn't want that. He wanted his own team of scientists. That was his rule. He would do this. He would stay at this camp, but he was going to convince his scientist friends, the people that he knew and the people that he worked around before, to go to this camp and help build this bomb. He was warned when he was bringing people in there. He said, this guy has a background that matches Russian intelligence and a bunch of things like that, and we're afraid of this being a problem. And Oppenheimer got mad and said that we can all just leave right now. So they made the deal. They trusted Oppenheimer to do that. Next thing you know, when the bomb got made and they dropped it, secrets were stolen and ripped out, and that's when they found out it was that one guy, and he was so surprised that he did it to him.
Yeah, but their spy was different than the spy that I was talking about with the Rosenthals, and when they were, well, executed in 1953. Um, that sort of when this was all happening, 1953, that was the birth of Joseph McCarthy, where he took this whole thing, the spy in our top secret facility, he took that and ran with it. And that's where he came out with. And for some reason, who did he go after? He went after Hollywood. And you kind of went, I
Well,
think that was his
that
downfall, really.
that was a weird thing too, because like recently I've been doing a lot of clips on LBJ's telephone conversations,
Yeah, I've
particularly
seen them. Those are fantastic.
particularly I'm fascinated with LBJ. I know a lot of people do not like him. I'm not saying he was a good guy at all, but I think if you understood how he was and what our depiction of a president is just fascinating to me. I mean, everyone always talks about like the bunghole thing when he's ordering pants and he wants some more room increased in the crotch between the area between his ass cheeks and his bunghole or something like that. That's what he says on tape. It's just weird hearing a guy say that. And he burps while he does it too. But it's interesting because I'm looking at all this. Jack Valenti was involved with the whole McCarthy era thing, and he was also involved into Hollywood, and he's a close friend of LBJ. So I have a phone call with, I think it's one of the main people in Hollywood at the time. He goes, Ted Sorensen, JFK's close aide, was leaving the administration because he had helped LBJ for a year. He likes LBJ, but he loved Kennedy. He wanted to write a book about Kennedy. So he's like, I'm going to write this book about Kennedy and I need to step away to write this book. So I'm retiring. And he goes, how about I get you in, like, what are you going to do next? And Ted Sorensen's like, I'm thinking about doing like a movie production for Kennedy because this book I'm writing about him is a memoir to his life and his legacy. And so LBJ gets on the phone with Ted Sorensen right there, and he calls some dude in Hollywood, and he's asking him, "Hey, you're gonna let this man in? You hear me? And then the guy's like, yes, sir, I'll do anything you need, LBJ. And like, he's like very, like, you just shows what LBJ was involved in. But a lot of that stuff, the films and things like that, look at the whole Vietnam era. What's LBJ get blamed with? The whole Vietnam War because he increased troop by way too much, sent way too many people over there, and really just got us in a never ending war that we ended up losing in the long run. But with the Hollywood stuff, look at every Vietnam film. Does it leave you feeling like we won anything? Does it leave you feeling like we lost, or does it make you feel just confused? It's because the only way we could actually do a movie on Vietnam without totally diving into the fact that we got our asses handed to us, not discrediting it at all. I'm just saying that was a very bad war to get involved in, and we all agree on that.
Oh yeah, I think it was just from a just sort of, well, I wasn't very old when all that was happening, but it was in many ways you have LBJ, and he kind of pulled like a Nixon in a way. What he was doing was that was where you had a lot of youthful dissenters were appearing. So what do you do with youthful dissenters? You draft them and you send them to another country. So there was some of that going on where he was like, well, it will just make people behave. We'll just draft them and send them away. And
Surprisingly, it's LBJ had the largest acceptance rate than any other president amongst youths because that's where he went campaigning. Nobody thought of it back then. Everyone was focused on the major institutions, major like parades and major locations like Dallas and all these other places that had a large percentage vote. LBJ just started going on campuses. It's like with Nixon, people don't remember Nixon. People didn't really hate Nixon that much either. It became added to the historical record
that,
after
yeah,
the
that was
fact.
added later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just
It's,
don't think people like Nixon. He's a little bit slimy of a guy.
it was just, yeah, well, his involved, I had no idea, like, other than when we were dealing with stuff I learned through you was how tied into the spy side of things he was before Kennedy. Like he was involved in the CIA, I think, in like the late 50s, wasn't he? In the early 60s, you know? And
It was originally the OSS. He knew about all the covert operations with the OSS because Dwight Eisenhower, he was the vice president.
yeah, and the OSS, I think, split off into the CIA, the FBI.
Well, yeah, it turned into the CIA because they had to rebrand it.
Yeah. And then the NSA came in much later. you
That's
know,
that's why I like listen to these phone calls, dude. Because like even with Nixon, he's got so many hours of tapes that are untranscribed because they're so unintelligible to read.
it makes me wish that I got when I first moved over here, I met Harry Shearer. Um, he was doing a project where because the Nixon tapes had just been released to the public, and he wanted to do basically not like a Saturday Night Live sketch of it, but he wanted to do, I think he was going to play Nixon, and I was going to play, I think, Spiro Agnew.
Oh hell yeah!
And
I would pay all the money in the
and so
world.
I got like I had quite a few callbacks to get in and do it, and I think they finally went with like a name. I think they went with a bigger name, but it would have been like prosthetics. They were going to do us up into in fact the way he had it done was it was almost caricature prosthetics, but the whole point of it was none of the script would be changed. The whole point of the Nixon tapes was they were so ludicrous that their comedy value was just in someone spoke these words out loud in a meeting, and that was the whole point. And
Have you ever heard the famous parts of some of the ones they got transcribed before?
I'm sure I have. It's been quite a while, kind of thing. But I heard some of them during this thing because we actually auditioned with some of these things. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it was Spiro Agnew. I don't know. I can't remember if I'm getting that right. There was going to be three of us. There was going to be Nixon, Agnew, and um, Kissinger.
It was probably Agnew because Agnew was known as the bulldog for
Yes.
Nixon.
Yeah. That was the big thing. And they were like, Harry Shearer kept saying to me, "You're a bulldog." He goes, "You would sell out your mother, your grandmother, her shoes to do your job because that doesn't matter. Like you're just doing your job. And if people get in your way, that's okay." And in fact, you don't even notice that people are in your way. You're just blah, and this is how we need you to be. And that was it was really interesting reading these. But God, Robbie, I got to tell you, that was like 2010, so I can't even
That's
remember.
pretty cool, though, dude. I didn't know that about you. That's pretty cool. You know, I'm a history nerd. Come on now.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing, and but I would have loved to have done this, and you'll have to look it up to see if it finally got done. I'm pretty sure it did. So look up Harry Shearer Nixon and see what this was, and it'll be him just doing the tapes. Like if you're interested in it, I'm sure there's a YouTube video of it, or it's on, because I think they were going to put it on like HBO or something like that, and that would have been like, well, it would have been cool just working with Harry Shearer, but the whole thing about just these Nixon tapes and nothing was going to get changed. And some of the things we said were, I remember we're doing the lines and the three of us would just start laughing and go, okay, this is one thing that we can't do when we're doing this, even, no matter how silly these sound. And it's like, and that was the whole point, was they weren't silly. It was just some of the things that we said were so grotesque.
I'll give you an example of one. The one that always gets tossed up as a conspiracy theory whenever someone wants to debunk one of like the funnier ones is Bohemian Grove, the giant owl statue when all these politicians around a table. Nixon says it on the tape. He says, I got invited to go to this Bohemian Grove and dance in front of this owl statue. And he goes, I'll be honest with you, it's the most faggiest goddamn thing I've ever seen. That's exactly what he says. He says those words. You cannot not laugh at that because he's being like I said, Nixon did his own version of the tapes. He's not the first one.
But even then, you think about it, just pull that out. Like when you have LBJ talking about his bunghole.
Yes.
That's what you said in the 60s.
Of
That's what
course.
you didn't say asshole,
Like you have
which is
JFK calling out John McCone, the guy from the CIA, calling him he called him what does he call him? Called him a little something ass something. He called him something. He's like he's just an ass or something like that.
but you have people like they would use like words like bunghole or like
Yeah.
or cornhole, but they wouldn't say asshole because that was offensive kind of thing. But then when you have Nixon say something like again but this different time, but saying something like that was the faggiest thing I've ever seen. To call somebody a fag in the 70s, that was like in the States, like over here, a fag is a cigarette. So
Yeah.
it's a different type of thing altogether, and it's also a bundle of sticks as well,
You don't need to rationalize it. I mean, it's an audio tape. That's the historical.
Yeah, it's the other thing, and
it.
it's just him. Like it's a very unpresidential thing to say, is what it is, and that's what makes it funny. But you forget that even the presidents were people. Like we forget
Of course,
that.
yeah.
I do that all the time. I think that if somebody gets elected to a position, they immediately there's a shelf that appears that they're not going to go below. No, they go below that shelf all the time.
Well,
we just don't hear it.
Wrapping around, they just did another JFK hearing on the 20th.
Did they? Wow.
So there was one already that was kind of really bad. It had Oliver Stone in it, and none of the congressmen people took it seriously. Now, I've spoken to Judge Thunheim on my show 3 times. He was just in the one on the 20th. Now, he is a federal judge for the Assassination Records Review Board. He does believe Oswald did it or did do the act, but he just says the most common thing. He just goes, the government was watching Oswald, had a connection with him long before the assassination, and we believe that the cover-up was the fact that they were trying to hide the fact that they have this long relationship with Oswald. That's his belief. He said it flat and clear in Congress. That's the most simplest thing you do. Doug Horn, one of the members of the Assassination Records Review Board, who did a lot of great work, is probably one of the most foreknowledged experts out there, just said, in what world do you have, in a lone nut world, do you have the autopsy get changed 4 times in 2 weeks? The autopsy results getting changed 4 times in 2 weeks. And the most damaging things about the autopsy that would reveal whether there were 2 shooters or not, those materials have disappeared. He goes, in any world where it was just a lone assassin, that would not be the story. And there wasn't a response to that because you really can't. So there's a couple congressmen people that were on the first one that went to the second one and actually were there to entertain and wanted to really know more, that were interested in more. But there was a woman who spoke, and I'm forgetting her name, but she was a historian for LBJ and like all the presidents and stuff like that. And she was like, I don't like all this wild speculation and theories. And then they just started saying things, and they had the documents and everything to back it up. She was just kind of sitting there kind of like, What do I do? It's like there's the difference between researching the death event and getting into the nitty gritty and the intelligence operations and stuff like that. Then there's researching the person. Now I'm trying right now to get LBJ historians on my show. It's not going well because of the matter of I'm on the Kennedy side of things, and most of the Kennedy crowd thinks LBJ was involved in some way. I do not think that. I will state it right now. What I do think is that he was responsible for the cover up. Now, whether he was knowingly doing it or not, I have many phone calls with him and others stating that they think it might have been Khrushchev's part or it might have been a Castro type situation. Everything is boiling down to other things besides Oswald. Now, again, the Warren Commission, the official record and what everyone kind of knows about it, and I think this is relatively new information, was that LBJ established the Warren Commission. It was an idea that he had from a famous phone call with J. Edgar Hoover, where they said we can't have a rash of investigations going on. This was the 25th, so 2 days after Kennedy is dead. 2 days or three after Oswald shot and everything. So they're talking about, it's a famous phone call, like we need to have a rash investigations that's going to all boil down to J. Edgar Hoover's FBI report. Hoover did his report in 2 days. So there was no conspiracy. He was the lone assassin in 2 days. LBJ was going to make sure everything went back to that report, and he was going to get a bunch of people on board to look at the report and just make sure that it was correct. And in honesty, you had any dissenting views, you can include it, which they did, but it's going to be the FBI report. Well, I found on November 22nd, 2 hours after Kennedy is killed, Joe Aslop of the Independent Washington Star, I think it was, called LBJ and told him, you need to start a blue ribbon committee to go and analyze this and do all this type of stuff. And LBJ's like, I'm not doing that. For 3 days, LBJ denied creating the Warren Commission. He did not want that idea. He said everything's going to go right back to J. Edgar Hoover. He says, Hoover's going to do it. I trust Hoover's work, and Hoover will get it done. Hoover said, you don't need a committee. I got it. It changed on like the 25th and the 26th. They said there's now going to be like, I think at this point there was 3 or 4 different people talking about making separate inquiries into the assassination. That's not a fear of like, oh my God, they're going to get me figured out. That's a fear of, I think Oswald wasn't just by himself. The public needs to calm down, and we need to establish this committee. Again, Earl Warren was the head of that committee. He blocked.
And he didn't want to do it, did he? Yeah.
No, he didn't. No, well, Earl Warren didn't want to do it. He rejected it twice. Bobby Kennedy went to him and then rejected it. Now, that's from LBJ's phone call. But a lot of people didn't want Earl Warren on there. The reason why Richard Russell didn't want to serve was because Earl Warren was on it. And then
okay.
Richard Russell's the famous one where he's the main dissenter that denied LBJ like 8 times. And LBJ said, I'm not going to stick the FBI on you, but you're goddamn going to serve. And there's a famous photograph where Johnson, he did the Johnson treatment where he leaned over people like this, basically. And he's doing that to his friend, Richard Russell. Now, he called Richard Russell 3 times that day. The one that we all know is one phone call. He called him 3 times that day. He called him two days before. He called him every day afterwards until like December 7th. And then he kept in contact with him throughout the years. But on December 7th, he goes, how's my buddy? This is after he named him for the commission. He goes, how's my buddy doing? And he goes, oh, I'm just tired. He goes, you going to go outside and enjoy the beautiful day? He goes, well, I can't. You got me on this damn commission. It's got me beat to shit. And he's literally talking to him like that. And he's like, oh, no, I'm hurting you, aren't I? I'm just putting you down, aren't I? And he's like, LBJ is like, yeah, you're going to do it, but I'm going to have fun with you if you're going to keep complaining about it. Because it was to serve the country. And again, this is stuff like in context, you're looking back on it. They're all talking about, I need you to control the House. I need you to control the Senate. I don't want to see anybody looking into anything.
So I guess if you look at it that way, just the way that LBJ is, even talking on the phone, if somebody is doing like a conspiracy and there's all like dark Illuminati crap going on, you don't talk like that to people on the phone, like to your friend, like you don't rib them about putting them on this committee. So again, it could be that there might have been other people pulling the strings other than LBJ. Because we all know that the president doesn't really run things, but like the whole thing about with people what were they? They were just trying to cover up the fact that, well, I guess control is the thing, wasn't it? They just needed to control the situation.
Think of it like this. And again, this might get me in trouble with JFK people. I don't really care because I think it's just probably the most honest approach to it. Think about the difference between anime and then like another manga or something like that. And think of those diehard fan bases. And if you call one the incorrect name, they get really upset. Think of it like this. JFK offered the vice presidential spot to Lyndon Johnson. the main thing is that the main theory from JFK sided people say that they weren't really being serious. Bobby said you need to find a way to cool Johnson down, or he's going to be a vengeful person coming at you with everything he can dig up, dirt or whatever he possibly can on you. So you might as well just cool the ice a little bit, not thinking that he'd actually accept the vice presidential spot. And Lyndon Johnson apparently grabbed at it. Well, apparently from Lyndon Johnson's phone call, he talked about what the people should have did instead of Yarborough and Connally fighting. That's why at the November 22nd, there was a fight on the airfield. Johnson wanted Connally to ride with him, and nobody wanted to ride with Yarborough. So JFK was like, you're going to ride with LBJ, and I'm going to take Connally. And if anybody has a problem with that, then he can fucking walk. And that's when this became this fight. And a lot of people use that as a conspiracy. It's just a little spitter batter. LBJ's talking about that on the phone, and he literally states, he goes, what they should have did to cool each other off was did what Kennedy did when he offered me the vice presidential spot. He pulled me aside, we had a couple of beers, and we talked, and I agreed to be the vice president. And it's like, that's more accurate than the whole, I'm going to just toss out a fake offer to LBJ to calm him down. We can make him into a monster. He is monstrous. But again, you listen to LBJ talk, dude, one of the smoothest politicians I've ever seen. I hate to say it like that, but he had the power and the aggression to get over on anybody.
Because the way, like some of the things that the way it was coming out, it was like he was doing his own Diddy parties.
Did. Except he wasn't dirty. Like, that's the thing, is like LBJ did show his Johnson. That's very famously recorded.
But I mean, some of a lot of people, famous people did stupid stuff like that. So he
also did a lot of phone calls in the bathroom, because I notice it when I'm listening to him. I hear LBJ echoing and then the person not echoing. And then I was listening to it, I was like, man, I got to clear up just LBJ's sound. And then I heard the guy go, Mr. President, should I call you back at a different time? Or are you busy? He's like, nah, I'm just preoccupied on the toilet, but I'm listening to you.
So it's interesting. Like, so here's a president who has a phone installed in the bathroom, which, like, these days, you don't really think much about that, but having a landline in your bathroom would have been absolutely ridiculous. That meant that, there would have been, like, some famous person would have it when they're having a bath. They'd have it on the phone. But that would have been so dangerous. You drop the receiver in there and you could, because they're electric. There's stuff going on there. But so that's funny that he's sitting on the throne having these conversations. One of the things I've learned a lot, and you need to cut yourself some slack as well when you talk about, like when they talk about preeminent researchers or experts, you'd be one of them, like on JFK, because for the amount of research that you've done, holy crap, like you don't become an expert by getting a degree or anything like that. You get expert by reading the stuff, like understanding the stuff. And I think one of the things that you do is you've never taken something for face value. You've always looked underneath it, behind it. Where did this come from? Why was this done? What's it tied to? And then you go, and then from there, you've always said to people, make your own decision. Let's have a conversation about it. But I'm not going to tell you this is right. You need to tell me either it's right or it's wrong. You just say, what do you think about this? And that's how you've sort of always run, out of the blank, which is always the cool thing. But I've learned so much about LBJ and JFK in the stuff. And it's one of those parts about American history where you think about it and you go, it just should never have happened. For the amount, how it was bungled and how it was still being sort of tossed around like a hot potato. It's all like, it's one of those things where you kind of go with governments, you kind of go, how can you not see that not dealing with this is making it more suspicious kind of thing? Like, just make a decision, do something about it, and then go. And people can go, I didn't agree with that. It was like that last thing you just posted it just recently about the guy on the phone. He's talking about the Warren Commission, where he goes, now I don't agree with their finding on this.
It's Connally. It's Connally.
Yeah, but he says that's not to mean that I didn't agree. I don't agree with the whole thing. Yeah.
Connally was the one in front of JFK when he got shot. So Connally's stating that the bullet that hit JFK was not the one that hit me. That's the magic bullet that went through two people. He said, that's not the one. I got hit by a different bullet. I know I did. And he stood that. And again, that's against the official narrative, but he agrees with the official conclusions of the Warren Commission, decides that one little disagreement. And this is where members of the commission had problems. I mean, Surprisingly, I had Monica Wisak on here, and she said that she thinks that it was this, and I might have gotten this thing wrong, but I actually looked into it and I was correct originally. And again, that's going to happen. There's so much sloth of information out
Oh
there.
yeah.
Dude, a lot of these conspiracy theories and a lot of things that go on about like the personality of LBJ, there is some truth to it, but a lot of it does come from William Manchester's book, The Death of a President. Again, William Manchester wrote horrible things about LBJ in that book. He was paid by Jackie Kennedy to do this, make a book about the Kennedy administration and the years on it. Well, he also wrote about the stuff with JFK scandal wise. He wrote about a bunch of things about Bobby and stuff like that. Jackie sued him and tried to get the book not published or re-redacted and everything like that. But LBJ was dealing with what for a month and a half after that, dealing with calling advisors and saying, what do I say to the press? Because they're going to ask me about this particular thing about this instance that's written in this book. And then next, Connolly wrote a book, and LBJ is like, God, my best friend's writing a book. Because you got to remember, you can look at the videotapes. There's Christmases with Connolly and LBJ together. They were good friends. And he even told him, he goes, look, I know you don't think you got hit by the same bullet, and I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying I don't want to have to, run against my friend here. I want you to go up as well. But he's sitting there calling people, trying to make sure Yarborough doesn't run. Somebody convinces him not to run because he doesn't want him going up against Connolly. He wants Connolly to win. He's being a human being with his own biases with his friends. Again, a lot of this confusion stuff like that, like the meanness of LBJ, I'm sure he wasn't a nice guy. I'm not saying that. I'm not defending him at all. But I think if you look at like the ways that a politician was able to get things done, I think LBJ should probably be looked at a little bit closely because of the fact that he was such a dissatisfied person. And that's like with Nixon. Nixon gets the clown rap of everything. But have you ever heard Bill Murray talk about Bob Woodward?
No.
You know Bob Woodward, right?
I'm
He's
trying to
the
think
one
of
that
who.
released the papers about the Vietnam and everything
Yes,
like
yes, yes,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Watergate
yeah,
led to
yeah,
Watergate, basically.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
See, you say that, and I think Robert Redford and and
oh,
Dustin
I'm
Hoffman.
talking about the Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward guys.
Well, that's yeah. Well, that was from All the President's Men from the
Yeah,
movie.
but Bill Murray stated that when he read the book that Bob Woodward did about Jim Belushi, who was a close friend of Bill Murray, and Bob Woodward was just this guy who barely knew him. He read the 5 pages in, put the book down, and says, "I think they framed Richard Nixon." He goes, "Because if you got this guy who his first big story ever was Watergate, the biggest story in history. His first story was that. How much did he get wrong?" And that's the thing with Nixon. We don't know why he didn't burn the tapes. We didn't know. Everyone's going, LBJ's acting. He knows he's being recorded. I go, he knows he's being recorded, but he also knows these aren't going to be released until like 50 years after he's dead.
Well, he probably even never thought they'd be released.
Again, Hoover's testimony. I didn't know Hoover testified to the Warren Commission.
Oh, wow.
It was leaked to the press, and the guy stated, and it's an episode I did with Paul Abbott, Jeremiah O'Leary, the Washington. This guy popped up all throughout, like the HSCA's investigation, the original Warren Commission investigation. He was an inside plant by J. Edgar Hoover for the Washington Star, I think it was called. Because they said that there was I think it was Robert McNamara or Ramsey Clark who did the Clark panel that was investigating the assassination of JFK. He was talking to LBJ. He goes, I don't know if Jeremiah O'Leary published this article, but either someone gave him this information or Hoover willingly told him this information, because this is not something that you can just pick up.
Yeah. So are you thinking something along the lines of like Nixon and his crew were doing dirty things kind of thing? Watergate was a bad idea, but still he didn't think those tapes would get released. Can they get it? And so somebody somewhere went,
I think he thought the tapes were going to absolve him. And I think they do. I think if you really listen to the tapes, I think you get a different depiction of what history remembers about Nixon. I think they were going to look at the tapes and think that, oh, wow, these guys aren't being like how they usually are. Like, we have a 14-minute gap in one of the most important tapes with LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover. We have many gaps in tapes, or LBJ goes, what I'm about to talk about is kind of a little bit out there. So he turns on his TV and just starts talking really low while his TV's playing. So all I can do is I could turn up all the sound, but I cannot erase because the tape quality is so crap. I cannot put in a caption for things, even though I can hear him clearly say it. I can't do it because people won't agree with that. Again, it's like with AI in the industry. I got people saying that half these tapes are fake. I go to the presidential LBJ library. People are going, why is it coming out now? They want you to see all this now. And I go, no, it's because I'm sitting here drinking some whiskey and I decide to go on the fucking LBJ library and find a thing that was released in 1999, then try and be sober enough to make a good clip on it while also making sure the subtitles are correct, which is a pain in the ass because LBJ has a southern accent that is like, he says words where I'm like, I don't know what he just said. I have to might repeat that.
And it's funny that's your reason. You're like, no, it's not AI. I was drunk.
I was drunk. Yes, 100%. I'll admit to that. Fuck. You know how much tapes I've been listening to? I've listened to over 300 hours of
And
LBJ
this
in
is
the past month.
and if anything, that's gonna make you drink, man. Holy crap! And that's why it's so funny. But you know, it when you were mentioning about that guy's book, it reminds me of like these days where you have so many like when you have so many keyboard warriors out there who read something on Wikipedia, which is junk. You know, it could anybody can update that, you know, and they go, well, I read it on the internet. It must be true. And just imagine what it was like back in the 60s or the early 70s when a book comes out. And most people would go, well, if it's in a book, it must be true. I mean, he took the time to write a book. I mean, like nowadays you can just update any article, you know, blog post, do whatever, and there's still people who believe it. Like a very good example was what happened to Assassin's Creed Shadows by Ubisoft, who they had like a black samurai in their thing, and they based their whole concept of this guy was a real person by this book by an author by the name of Thomas Lockley, who turns out was all made up. But he sort of portrayed it as this is real Japanese history, and no, it's not. No, it's not even close. The guy, you know, barely existed. He was a blip in the Japanese history. But here you have a game company, $1 billion game company who went, well, he says it's true, so it must be true. So let's base our whole game around that, which would have been absolutely fine, except they ended up saying this is the most historically accurate game that we've ever done, and that's immediately when people are going to go, okay, we're going to look into this for you. Never challenge the internet, you know, like that's just stupid. But I could just imagine when this guy wrote his book and people went, well, it must be true. He wrote a book.
Well, a lot of people, he did write a really good one. That's why Jackie got her attention caught by that. I'm just pulling up my computer. I'm going to have my other account.
No, that's it.
Um,
Kind of makes me. Did you ever have an Encyclopedia Britannica when you were younger, or did that
uh,
exist
I
anymore?
used to have to read the dictionary because I used to spell words wrong sometimes. And my dad was like, I want you to read a page every day. And I did started that like in third grade. And I
You
just,
know, that's the first time. Like when I was younger, I would say to my mom, "How do you spell this word?" And she would go, "What am I, a dictionary? Look it up." These days, and I saw it on an ad on TV where the kid goes, "Dad, how do you blah, blah, blah?" And his dad went, "What am I, Google?" And I just went, "No, it just doesn't make any sense."
what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably 1 second where I have to pause just so I can pull my other account in here. But I want to play some of these LBJ phone calls because I think you'll find them pretty fascinating too. And it really just validates what I've been saying. So I just don't want people thinking out there listening for the first time that like I'm just tossing out wild speculation and theories. I would rather try and show people the accurate information. Again, do I want it to be some grand conspiracy? No, well,
Yeah, it's not even about conspiracies and stuff. I think what it is when you're getting back, you did a very good, you mentioned something about how when somebody's portrayed, like Kennedy himself was portrayed as a villain for a while, like about, you know, particularly when his ties to like Marilyn Monroe and around that
a
time. And
lot
there
of people
was,
didn't like the cheating factor. Again, I don't think people. I think it's really maybe it's probably light touch. I know he definitely probably did cheat. That we have record of that. Um,
but for some people, particularly during the 60s, that was a moral sin kind of thing. That made you an evil person. Like if you were cheating and particularly, you know, cheating on someone like Jackie, you're like, and you're a president or you're a high profile figure. How are people not going to see this? But if you're a serial adulterer, you know, there could have been, you know, there could have been lots of things going on kind of thing. But yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. But I think you know, a lot of the presidents got tainted with, you know, huge brushes. You know, I can't, it's very difficult to think of a president that left that office without negative connotations. It really, there hasn't been a president in the last,
Again, that's
in
the
my
thing.
lifetime anyway.
We're always gonna like, there's theories, there's things about Joe Biden. Everyone has their person that they like, and everyone has the person that they don't like. A lot of the stuff that gets written by people necessarily aren't always the good stuff too. And again, for me, like I've heard so much about LBJ, and you would just think I wouldn't just like him. My only thing with LBJ that I wish would have happened is I would have loved to see him and Hoover square off. The only issue is that for 30 years they were neighbors and best friends, basically. And LBJ's famous quote is, "I'd rather have Hoover inside my tent pissing out than outside my tent pissing in." So obviously he knew who to cross, who he could cross. And again, I've had Hoover. You've probably heard it with what's his name, Mark Aronson, who did the Hoover biography. And I thought he was going to be anti-Hoover, so I was willing to get in all to the dark shit. And then he starts hitting me with Hoover's life and his story and how he became the person he was. And I'm sitting there like, what about the COINTELPRO stuff, man? He's like trying to get Martin Luther King. He wrote a fake suicide note to Martin Luther King to get him to try and kill himself, or his family was going to be harmed. You don't think that's like nuts? And he goes, I mean, what's the context of the time? And you go into these things, and again, it's accepting things that are inherently in you not right. Like you just want to be like, this is horrible. But you have to look at it from his viewpoint. Hoover was all about, I'm afraid communism is going to come over here and we're all going to be screwed over. And also, he was in a position of power. He liked how things ran. He didn't want anything running any other way. I mean, that's at fault for everybody. Would Kennedy have become a danger to people or mentalities of things the way he's going with the Cold War? Or would he have brought peace? Again, that's another big question for all of us. I'm just changing over the sharing options. I'm going to share this real quick. So this is the Jerry O'Leary thing I was talking about.
Fletcher?
You get me a statement where I can answer it tomorrow in my press conference if they ask you.
Yes, sir. I will. Now, on the leak, they haven't done anything about the leak of the information because they're pretty sure that Jerry O'Leary got it either from Mr. Hoover or somebody close to Mr. Hoover. And anyhow, this information is going to be made public just as soon as it can be printed. There's nothing to hold back, letting everybody have Mr. Hoover's testimony. So they just would make it available to anybody and say there's no reason why this should be secret. And they have not done any checking of it.
This is what's so crazy is that Hoover told them, I do not want my testimony. I don't need to give testimony. There's nothing important I can add that would have any context for this. But they were like, we need to get his testimony just for the record. We don't have to release it. LBJ was making sure that it was going to stay sealed so no one would have Hoover's thing, much like we still have JFK files sealed. But then he's like, it got leaked to the press. And he goes, well, who do you think leaked it to the press? Well, we think Hoover leaked it to the press because he was getting so pissed off that he wanted to have his report be the only thing, trust the FBI, but everyone's coming to him, hey, we got another commission going on. We're going to take some load off your back. And he goes, you don't think my FBI can handle the load? And it's like he's getting this ego all involved into it. And I'm just like, dude, this guy's like playing manipulative chess where everyone on his own team is like, what the fuck is he doing?
So basically, he does his thing, and then he has his boys leak it to the press and go, they should have stuck with me. Anyway.
Well, that's the thing is like, you got to understand, besides calling somebody on the phone for 2 or 3 minutes, or if you're not seeing them in a thing later that day, maybe the president LBJ's off doing some type of campaign raising thing. Then you don't know what's going on. And next thing you know, you have this popped up on your desk that there's a commission going to be wanting to take your testimony. And you're like, I thought I didn't have to give testimony. I just spoke to him 3 days ago.
Yeah. And also, again, different time, like different when you think about communication in the way it was, where you had to wait for a phone call or a letter or a telegram, and because they were still doing teletypes and telefaxes back then. And oh my God, because just imagine
Sorry.
Just imagine the confusion that where you've got. I thought we worked through this. So what do we got here? This is.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was trying to find the next one without hitting stop share, so we had to reload the screen.
No, that's all right.
This one's a funny comment I found. So he was talking to Carl Albert, and he says something about Oswald in this.
All for it. I like your committee. The speaker didn't think his first impression was that there shouldn't be anybody from the judiciary on it, since they might have to pass on the issue. But
not going to pass on Oswald. He's deader than hell.
That's right. I think Warren should be chairman of it. Just between you and me.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think it's perfect.
Well, I haven't done it. I'm drafting an executive order, and I don't need to, but I believe it's better to do it than not to do it.
I do too, and I think you ought to do it before everybody starts moving in. I had a letter from Danny Fussell, and the speaker and I talked it over. He thought his committee had jurisdiction. Other committees thought they had jurisdiction, and they were all going to start putting in resolutions. And of course, a few have put them in. We've buried them in the Rules Committee. And,
so I just thought it was interesting because at this point, hold on. You can go ahead, Kasper.
It's very interesting how how he referred to that as buried in the Rules Committee.
Yeah. Again, a lot of these people that were ahead of this right now were thinking about doing their own committee. Hale Boggs, the one who eventually served on the Warren Commission, was open about saying that there needs to be an investigation and things like this. And LBJ had to call Hale Boggs and say, "Hey, man, you're going out there saying all these things. I got to have you on my commission then, because I don't want a rash of investigations. I just want everything pointing back to the FBI report. You find something different, you state your opinion." The only surprising person was Richard Russell. He was, think OSS, then think CIA. He was in charge of that whole, not Alan Dulles was the main guy, but Richard Russell had say when it came to in knowledge and information with Alan Dulles and how the CIA ran and everything like that. And Richard Russell's like, I'm going to state, if I don't believe it's Oswald, I'm going to say I don't believe it's Oswald. And that's where we get the famous phone call where he goes, I honestly think it might have had some Khrushchev involvement. And then LBJ's like, maybe Khrushchev was involved. He goes, and if you want my real honest opinion, I bet Castro had something to do with it too. And it's just like, they're not even mentioning Oswald. They're talking about two other political things, and they're really trying to steer it away from that.
Yeah. I think, and you look at it that way, and you look at all the things that were going on, and you look at LBJ's options, I guess, and if you had, can you just imagine, think of all the confusion there is already. Imagine what confusion there would have been if you had three other committees going who are all doing, and they would have had to overlap experts, and you would have had the same people. You would have had the same people being interviewed by three different committees, and you can just, in fact, you could even imagine pulling a Hoover going, why am I talking to you guys? I just did this.
Hoover surprisingly, when before he passed away, or he made a rule with his secretary, I think her name's Helen Gandy. She admitted to this in the church committee when they interviewed her, because they're like, where's Hoover's files? Everyone knows that Hoover had a blackmail file, not only in his office, but he had one at home, and he actually had three at home. Helen goes, I burned it. They're like, excuse me? She goes, Hoover told me that when he died, if I could do him one last favor, which would be to destroy all of his blackmail and all his files that he had in his drawers. And she took all of it with an FBI agent from the office, went to Hoover's house, went down into the basement, and spent the next 3 days burning it. What did he have? What information did he have? This is interesting because I love hearing LBJ cuss.
Now, if he can say that without his credibility being questioned, without leaving the impression that I'm forcing him to do it, that's what I would say.
Right. You wanted to say that the president has no recollection?
No, hell no.
I mean, the president granted...
I have a recollection. It didn't happen. I think it's a goddamn lie. Now, that's my best judgment, which I'd bet my life on. I honestly don't think they thought it happened. I think this. I have had somebody tell me in the last week that Chuck Roberts, Jack Valenti told me over the phone that Chuck Roberts and Chuck Bailey and Peter Lissagore all were really thinking that I had been mistreated. I think what they do is call up some sap and tell them that, you see. You know Chuck Bailey doesn't think I'm mistreated. You know Lissagore doesn't. If they did, they'd be happy. Marlinoff, don't you think so? I do.
So what he's saying here is, you'll hear a lot of people listen to LBJ talk, and they're like, he's lying. He was out there saying that the Kennedys were awful and all this type of stuff. And this gets into the Kennedy fan side of things. What I'm getting from this is that there was a party that happened, and this bottom person right here is Bill Moyers, who works for the press side of the White House. He stated that there's these things that are being attributed that you said that the Kennedys never treated you right, and all this type of stuff. Now, based on every phone call I've ever heard, there hasn't been a lot of derogatory language being blamed at the Kennedys. There's been some infighting for sure, but LBJ has never really talked trash on the Kennedys to them, or I'm sure there was conflicts. I think I've read some conflicts and stuff too. So again, it's probably more balanced in this aspect of things. But these guys were saying that LBJ was being mistreated, and it eventually got to be that LBJ saying he was mistreated. And that got printed in the press. And then people are like, why are you calling out the guy who was assassinated? You took his position. That's a little bit suspicious. When LBJ really didn't say these things. That's why he's saying it's a damn lie. Now, he does say something in here because in Manchester's book,
I don't think they're concerned about my being mistreated. I think they'd be the most happy people in the world because I think they mistreat me the most. When I see Chuck Bailey's insinuations and imputations and Molinoffs and Lissagores, I just think it. So I think that I would just, read that last sentence I dictated.
I will not discuss the various, this is George, I will not discuss the various attributions credited to so-called friends and alleged intimates, except to say I believe them to be inaccurate and untrue. To that, Mr. President, Abe and I would add, the President has granted no interview to anyone, including Mr. Manchester. He's asking...
No, I would go on with the first part of your statement.
All right.
I would substitute this in lieu of the fact that the President has no recollections, because I do have a recollection of not ever said a son of a bitchin' word to McHugh.
All right.
I never said to anybody that I got him told off. I never said to anybody that I called her honey because that was the Texas way.
So again, there's LBJ phone calls where you're listening to him and Jackie. I'll play you one. They sound like it makes you think of Jackie a little differently. Because they're flirting on the phone for sure. And this was like in December, like a couple days after JFK is like dead. And she was like, "Oh, people are going to start writing stories about me that, you know, I'm around with two presidents." And it's just like, what Jackie, what are you saying? And LBJ, again, this one right here.
I never said to anybody that I called her honey because that was the Texas way. I don't believe that's the Texas way. I think I would call people honey because if I felt they were honey. And I might have very well said that to Miss Kennedy, although I never felt that way about her and never believed it. I have held her kind of up on a pedestal and been very reserved with her, as her letters to me will indicate. Very proper, very appropriate, very dignified, very reserved, as I don't think I called Mrs. Kennedy Sr. honey. I think that is the creature of someone's imagination. So how can I not recollect it when it just didn't happen?
Right.
And I think not recollected implies that it could have happened and I not remembered, don't you?
I agree.
So they're trying to coach him on what to say to the press. Because again, Manchester's book and articles came out saying that LBJ was flirting with Jackie, and it became this whole thing. Like, and Jackie was just so, LBJ called up Jackie and was like, "What's going on?" But then Jackie didn't know either because she didn't read the book. Nobody read the book except people that were Kennedy fans. And next thing you know, LBJ took offense to it. And he was like, "I want every transcript from November 22nd that Jackie had with anybody, any phone call she made. And I want all the ones on Bobby too." And then he took it as an offense where he then tried to slander Kennedy and go after Jackie and do this stuff to cover his own ass. Again, this became a giant issue and probably created tensions during a lot of this stuff. But I mean, you can listen to conversation. LBJ, didn't seem to.
It's interesting there, like from a wordsmith, like what I do, where he says, "Now, not recollected means that I might have done it. I just don't remember."
Yeah.
Whereas, because that way, that's basically you can cover a lie with a term like "I don't recollect." You know, that's why. How many times did you hear during the Warren Commission? I have no recollection of that. I do not.
Yeah, it's when they don't want to answer.
Yeah, but it's rather than them saying "I don't remember," they say "I do not recollect that," and that's such an interesting thing. Well, yeah, I guess, but you know, all the presidents had to be coached. All the, it kind of makes you.
Again,
well, yeah.
One of the most important guys, you'll see him right here. Think of my cursor right here all the way to the right, the guy at the top picture. He's bald up top, and he's also in this third one over here. That's Nicholas Katzenbach. He's the one with the famous Katzenbach memo that stated that there was conspiracy. It was Oswald acted alone, and he said that within like a few hours of the assassination to the public, and everyone had to pull him back. Like, what are you doing? And if you actually know who Katzenbach is, and a lot of people think he was the Grand Master in the conspiracy, like one of the people that were helping LBJ or whoever, he was Robert Kennedy's secretary, like his like close aide, like person that he worked with. If you hear him talk about Robert Kennedy, it is the most honest, genuine recollection of a person I have ever heard. I can play it. It's of the HSCA, and honestly, it made me change all my thoughts about um, Katzenbach, because I thought he was just an evil guy. But he was openly stating it. He didn't like talking to LBJ that much either. They only had few conversations, and a lot of it boiled down to Bobby. Like, see, it says my relationship with Bobby is the second clip on the right. He was asking him, what's your relationship with Bobby? He's like, Bobby's a good man. Bobby's this. And, he gave like one of the most honest reviews of Bobby in the HSCA, which is like, guys, if you think he's part of the conspiracy to kill JFK, I suggest you relook at his HSCA testimony, because he literally states, I think, like, when he's asked, what do you think about Hoover and the Kennedys? He goes, honestly, I don't think Hoover's ever been in a position where he came second to the president. And obviously with Bobby and JFK, they were close brothers, Hoover didn't like that. He tried his best to separate them, but he really couldn't. And, Katzenbach just gave an open description. He thought that Hoover was very abrasive and horrible during the investigation. It's this one right here. When Manchester wrote a book, everyone was kind of calling LBJ anti-Kennedy. And then sometimes the short's messed up and it won't play it. He literally states, I'm not anti-Kennedy. I've said nothing but good things about the Kennedys, and I've bit my tongue in chances where there's this and this and this. And again, it makes you think a little bit more about like how much was put into the historical record as being attributed to LBJ, but really came from a book of someone who was just slandering LBJ. I mean, we have books about that now about people, but we're living in the time.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, it's one of the things that I've learned from, recording any of this stuff is that.
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Play it. And then I'll comment.
No, go ahead, because you're gonna forget it before I.
No, I was just saying that the amount of misinformation that was being danced around, and this is also during a time, it's hard to talk about pre-internet to people who grew up with the internet, but to realize how communication would have been so difficult and how files could have been lost, like you hand over your film to be developed and you don't get it back. Now, the amount of times that happened to our family, that happened a lot. You sent your film away to be developed, and they would go, "Oh, they lost it," or "There was a problem," or because it wasn't developed, and so it's a very plausible thing that may have happened. And so the amount of when you have so many people throwing their words into the ring, if you hear it enough, and I imagine there was a lot of Mandela effect going on with stuff like there's probably things that people think happened didn't happen. Just you get enough people talking about it, and they all of a sudden they believe it happened, and you're like, no.
And I'm sure there's stuff that happened with LBJ where he's a monster to some of the Kennedys. I'm sure there's a lot of that spite, and I've heard angry phone calls of LBJ saying, "Damn Bobby to hell for going to Vietnam or going to other countries."
And you know what? Particularly these guys are. There's a lot of stress going on with like you think about the 60s, like what you think about any period, but the 60s in particular, Cold War, Vietnam, all this stuff, segregation, Martin Luther King, all this stuff is going on. And, the assassination, it happens. In fact, there were 2 assassinations in the 60s, weren't they? Like when was Bobby killed?
Yeah,
68?
Bobby was in 68. And they just released the autopsy photos of that. Do you know how much shit people are giving the government for releasing that?
Oh, because it's too graphic or what?
Well, yeah, but you see like why the Kennedy family wanted those saved for so long. I mean, you see the wounds exactly like where he was shot at, so there's not a question of that an autopsy report was wrong, but just seeing Bobby naked laying on a gurney with his body all like cut up and it's very not tasteful, and I think a lot of people are upset.
The autopsy photos. Oh, okay, yeah, because who wants the autopsy photos released anyway? Like it's different if if it was like if it was a crime scene photo, that's one thing, but like an autopsy photo,
I'm going to play this real quick and I'm going to stop sharing the screen. But
If I'd have gone up and picked Henry Cabot Lodge that ran against his brother, that'd be different. But they picked Lodge. And I can understand if I went up and picked Eddie McCormick and brought him down here and made him Attorney General. I can understand how they'd say something and let him start investigating some of Teddy's election stuff up there. I can understand it, but I don't play that way, and I don't want their support. I don't ask him to ever make a speech for me or to ever go to a convention for me or to ever cast a vote for me. I don't want anybody to do that. I'm not running. I'm not appointing people that way. I'm just trying to hold this country together and run a good government from now till January 1969. And I think I'm entitled to have a just a deal on it. I do too. Okay, partner. God bless you.
and then there's I'm not anti-Kennedy.
Yeah.
Secretary Rusk, 2192.
Well, play the I'm not anti-Kennedy.
Yeah.
You're gonna play it.
Yeah.
Come on.
I think I have demonstrated that I'm not a bigoted, biased, prejudiced, anti-Kennedy man. I've kept all that we had and all the vacancies I've had. I put in unquestionable Kennedy man. If Fowler wasn't a Kennedy man, I never saw one. He's loyal as a dog. Larry O'Brien is loyal as a dog. Katzenbach loyal as a dog, and Weaver. The only man's been brought in that wasn't a Kennedy man, and I don't know who he voted for, was Connor. He helped a lot. Yes, he did. Yes, he did, in Cuba. Back in Cuba, yes. Now, there are my 5 cabinet officers out of 11. And there's not one of them that, if I'd have gone up and picked Henry Cabot Lodge that ran against his brother, that'd be different, but they picked Lodge.
Oh, yeah.
He's literally trying to say I appointed Kennedy's people because not only he saw the benefit in them, but also was trying to show that he was supporting the Kennedy thing. And a lot of people took that as like him trying to use. And a lot of these guys, he called them, they didn't really like wanting to work. Larry O'Brien didn't want to work with LBJ, and Larry O'Brien's one of the theories why they think the Watergate scandal happened, because one of the offices they broke into was Larry O'Brien's. He was a Kennedy man. He had all the information on certain coups and CIA operations that were going on. Again, Nixon is a patriot of the CIA and the military, so he was more about trying to cover its ass.
Isn't it kind of crazy? There's all this, like, it's really weird when you think about all there's a conspiracy that just sort of popped up recently in the gaming industry, which is actually tied to government. Surprising enough, there's this company called Sweet Baby Inc., who's sort of, their whole thing is they're supposed to be promoting DEI in video games. And there's been a whole rash of issues happen with this. And this company has been really hammered with, like racist, misogynistic, activity kind of thing. It's just been discovered that this company was basically a front for the Canadian government as a PSYOP project. And
So this is all a PSYOPs project?
Well, this company, really what it is they came in and they said, we're going to upset the apple cart. We're going to change things. And so what do? Is you get rid of the evil white man in a way, like just real quick, but they replaced so many people with, diversity, color, gender, race, religion. And a lot of these companies have since gone bankrupt and closed. And it's just been revealed that this company, Sweet Baby Inc., was created by the Canadian government as to push this agenda through. And that's not going over really well in Canada right now, where it's like, but you think about the video game industry and you go, well, what's the big deal? It's $1 billion industry. And it's, you got some companies that are huge, and what's happening lately is Sony did a game where they spent close to $1 billion on it, kind of thing. And it bombed. You have Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed, which bombs. They did a Star Wars project, which bombed. There's all these companies are losing so much money that the entire gaming industry is changing. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with all these things. And it ties back into like what's happening is a lot of game companies have experimented with using AI voices, and are they going to replace voices, and are they going to still use real people voices? And I've always stuck to the mantra that if I just hang in there, I'll make it, kind of thing. I'll be one of the last few people left who still want to do this. And I think, I think that's why I'm still sort of around, just
I'm happy
trying
that
to
you
do
are.
these things.
I'm about to start putting our clips of RFK up because I got to
Well,
go back
yes,
to that
and
now.
because recently it's just sort of like I've, the amount of video games and stuff I've sort of like indie projects that I've auditioned for have been kind of funny, but we'll have to see if we can get some of that stuff out when it comes out. But I've been having a bit of fun lately, but it is a bit, there are people who are losing their jobs to AI, but what's going to happen is companies, I don't think this is not an issue about AI stealing our jobs. What it is lazy employers, lazy clients who think that it's cheaper to use AI and it'll be quicker. And once they use it, they'll realize it's not. It's just because it's like I've done projects for companies where their tagline will be like 2 words, and we will spend 35 minutes on these 2 words. And you're like, like I told you the story about Huawei, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, where I ended up doing.
They wanted a Canadian,
no, it
right?
wasn't. No, it was Xiaomi. That was what Xiaomi. And when you get a direction that's like, okay, we need you to sound like that you live in London, but you are American from the Midwest, but you speak fluent Chinese. That's what we need to hear in Huawei when you say it. And like, so that's all it is. And you're like, that's my direction. Are you kidding me? And we must have did 300 takes on that one word. It took two 2-hour sessions, and then finally they just sent me an email going, "Can you just wild us 30 different versions?"
Huawei.
Yeah, that's what it was. And so sometimes that's what I do in my job. Sometimes I'll get asked to do, "Can you give me a bunch of different versions of this word?" And you go, just that one word. And they'll go, yeah. And you go, okay.
And I've appreciated learning more about your kind of life. I think you're a very talented voice actor. I'm glad to call you a good friend. Happy that we're able to do so many podcasts as well too together.
I am as well, and one of I'll always appreciate all the stuff that I learned from the the Kennedy stuff, but right from the beginning, like when we first started doing this, I can't even remember. Was it during COVID? Our first session?
It was. I think it was during lockdown. It was
and
before Jason Latona came on. So
yeah, and I can't even remember who reached out to who.
I think I definitely reached out to you. I think I might have come across at that point I was looking at Instagram hashtags and seeing different things under various things. And I must have hit voiceover because Mark is a good friend of mine. He's been on the show since like episode 300. And so, I mean, I can honestly check right now when we were first.
You'll have to get some of us voiceover people together in that one session, and so we.
I wanted to do that for the longest time, but Mark's like I'm still waiting on clips for freaking Jack the Ripper from however long ago. Mark's a busy guy. He does it on the side. It's not a full-time thing for him.
And that's I totally understand. I've got a friend who's like that. He drives me crazy.
Your first episode was 630, December 6th, 2020.
Wow.
And you've been on about it probably, let's count them. More than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 times. This will be 18.
I tell you, yeah, I have a lot of fun. Just all this stuff. Yeah, and if we've got any more stuff coming up, I mean, that's the thing. If you need any more of the, LBJ stuff done for Instagram,
I might have to get you to do some transcripts recordings, and I might have to try and find a way to get something to get Johnson's voice, because I have the most important conversations, like the one where LBJ, when Kennedy dies, the day Kennedy's shot, he calls Dwight Eisenhower, who is like does not like Kennedy, and those are all oral transcripts. So it's like, for me, I want to show you the actual thing. A lot of people are going to deny it and say it's AI created. And it's like, to be honest, there is so much that is hidden behind, like I have to pay $60 to get tapes. The tapes I've been making for the longest time that people haven't heard before were HSCA testimonies, and they're right here. I got these sent to me. They're in CD format. So this all right in this here. You can thank Tim Smith for sending me these. All this. I got a drive link for them all, but you can see on the
fantastic
thing on it. HSCA
How
here.
crazy is that?
3. So they're all discs of the HSCA, and like I said, some of these are 6-hour testimonies. They're all in disc format. He was going to send me the fucking cassettes, and I was like, "Oh, please don't put those in the mail, dude." I was like, "I don't know what to do with that."
Yeah, exactly. For some people, it's like, what's a CD? I don't know what to do with that. Like
I can sit in my car and play a cassette because my damn thing still uses a tape deck. But for me, it's just like I'm not going to sit in my car and listen to Marina Oswald talk about how the FBI was abusing the hell out of her. It makes me sad. I don't want to keep you too long here, Kasper. We got to roll on the 2-hour mark here.
That's okay. Let me
get your links. I need to get your links.
My links. I've got a Linktree link, but I'm basically the only Kasper Michaels on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Just spell it with a K. You got me.
And as you can see, Kasper's rocking some of the original merch.
Yeah, I think this is the first out of the blank shirt I purchased. So
we have a lot better designs on there.
Oh, I'm sure you do. Actually, I think the first one I purchased was the cassette tape.
Yeah, the cassette one.
Yeah.
And then you purchased the podcast logo one too. That was in neon.
Yeah, exactly. These are the ones. Robbie, always a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank Podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.